All right, y'all, welcome to the show. We have a big show for you guys today. Of course, it's not our typical time of starting, if you will. This is not when we usually do our show. We usually do that on Thursdays or Tuesdays, but yesterday couldn't work, so we're doing a special Friday show. Of course, we're high atop a hot Jacksonville, Florida. Current temperature is 90 degrees and sunny out. And yeah, like I said, we have a big show for you guys today, as per usual. No rest for us in terms of what we have on our show. We have games of the year we'll be going over and goes in college football. Games of the year in college football. Interesting list here to go over. We have a question about Arkansas. Hate on Arkansas, us, like who? I don't know if that's involving us, but I will talk about that. The hate that's going around Arkansas, or the quote unquote hate. Then, of course, we'll wrap up with the team record projections series. That segment we've been doing since April, I believe, late April. We're doing the Clemson Tigers today. So if you're new here, of course, welcome to the show. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like the videos, like the streams. Also, be sure to follow us on Spotify as well. That's where you can get the audio-only version of the show. You can also get the extra pods when we do those. And be sure to follow us on the socials, on Instagram and on X, Twitter. So be sure to follow us over there. Again, we do this show live on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but this week, we're doing it on Friday. Special Friday edition of the show. So just be sure to do all that. And let's go ahead and get started here with a Josh Pate style paper pop. There you go. Games of the year in college football. We have a list here, not written on this piece of paper, but a list that I will be going over here. And pull up our graphic of just games that I am excited about. Of course, the season is about less than 100 days away, I believe. So we'll be getting closer and closer to the regular season. I figured, why not just go over the list of the games that we're excited about, like sort of the games that we would consider games of the year in college football. And I think this list, again, probably similar to a lot of folks, like sort of in line with other people's games of the year. Like, this is not like a unique list or anything, but certainly in a way, it is our list. And I guess it's going to look similar, but it is what it is. So let me put up the graphic here on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, you're just going to follow along with us. Move this over here for you guys, and yeah, here we go. So, first game up here we're going to talk about Georgia versus Alabama, the biggest game, and at least in my opinion, in the SEC in terms of conference game. I'm not talking about the non-conference, but in terms of the SEC conference, biggest game of the year, and the SEC is going to be this game: Bama versus Georgia. It's in Tuscaloosa. Bama, at least in the regular season, has won all these games going back to 2008, I believe. So it's been that long since Georgia has won a game against Alabama in the regular season. The last time, or the few times that Georgia has played Bama and they won, have all been in the postseason, right? Whether it's the national championship game many years ago or the SEC title game last year. Okay, Georgia has not beaten Alabama in the regular season since 2007. So something's got to give here at that point. Of course, it's Kellen DeBoer versus Kirby Smart. Kellen DeBoer has had, again, speaking about regular season, undefeated, hasn't lost in the regular season yet. So this will be a very, very interesting opportunity here to see if that whole trajectory changes or not. And of course, you have two of the most premier brands in the SEC. And remember, for the longest time, these two programs have not faced each other at all in the regular season. It's sort of like kind of using an historical example, sort of like the Cold War. Like you had the United States and the Soviet Union that didn't actually fight each other. Now, granted, they fought in proxy wars, but similar to Georgia and Alabama, they didn't actually face each other up front. Now, grant you, with the Cold War, it was more about mutually assured destruction with nuclear weapons, and with Bama and Georgia, just because they didn't face each other due to the schedule. And there used to be divisions of kids in college football, and the SEC had the East and the West, and these two were in opposite divisions, and they didn't play each other that much. So this game, to me, the fact that we're having this now for the third consecutive year, or the fourth consecutive year now, I believe now, That is great. That is great. We're having this game being played on a regular basis. And that is a good thing that the SEC and by extension ESPN and ABC have allowed to happen. So that game clearly should definitely be a game of the year. Just below that one, next on the list here, Texas Ohio State. This is without a doubt the biggest game in college football in the regular season. Non-con or conference, the biggest game. You have the two big brands in the sport. This is a helmet game. You have Sark, Arch Manning. You have the new additions on the offense of Cam Coleman, along with Hollywood Smothers coming over from NC State. You have Ohio State with Julian Sand and Jeremiah Smith back. You have all the new pieces coming in on defense for Ohio State. Can they stop Texas like they did last year? It's a night game. Yes, a rare night game for Ohio State. This will be Ohio State's first appearance on ABC in terms of a regular season game since they did the whole new TV contracts and whatnot. Since ESPN and ABC can't do Big Ten regular season games anymore. So yes, a lot of rareness, a lot of first time and long time stuff for both these programs. Again, in terms of the bigger picture here, from a historical matchup, from a helmet matchup, this is perfect. And it's also early in the year, and both of these teams haven't lost a game yet. There's also a possibility, like it could have been last year, this could be a game of the century implications. Could be the number one team versus the number two team in the country early on in the season. Sort of like, actually, ironically, kind of like the what was it, USC versus Ohio State in like 2006, 2007, I believe. So very, very similar vibes there. Just replace USC with Texas for Ohio State. Again, very similar vibes to those USC Ohio State games in the mid 2000s. So that's also a game that should be on here, right? I think that's another non-negotiable game. Another non-negotiable is probably the biggest conference game, even bigger than Georgia-Bama, Ohio State-Oregon. We saw this a couple of years ago, I believe. They didn't play last year, but they played each other, at least in the regular season, a couple of years ago in Eugene, the first year of this brand new Big Ten absorbing the old Pac-12. And now we get to see Ohio State host Oregon for the first time, actually, since 2021. Remember, there was going to be that series or the back-to-back where Ohio State would travel to Oregon and the non-con, and of course 2020 happened, but you did end up getting just a standalone Oregon going to Ohio State. So now we get to have Ohio State and Oregon now as conference foes, with Oregon going to the Horseshoe, okay? Again, these are the two most premier brands in the Big Ten. Yes, of course, Indiana has something to say there in terms of them winning a national championship recently and them having success under Coach Sig over the past couple of years. But if you're looking at the two biggest brands in the Big Ten and a long sustainment of success, unlike Indiana, which they won the national title last year and they won 10 games the year before, these are the two most premier brands in the Big Ten, at least of sustainability. Okay, even though, yes, Oregon was not in the Big Ten 10 years ago, they're still a premier brand, and they still have a lot of pull, and they obviously are a very, very reputable brand. And these are, again, probably even the two premier rosters in the country. Again, we can basically apply the way we're describing this game, Oregon, Ohio State, to Texas, Ohio State, and to Bama, Georgia. Like, that is crazy for both of these three games. For all of these three games, you can just like copy and paste the same thing we're saying in terms of describing these teams. So, moving right along, this one. Like, throw back to the old Pac-12, USC versus Oregon. Now, granted, this is a little bit different than the previous three we just mentioned, because those are obviously those three games are dealing with the premier rosters in college football. This one's big for a different reason. Yes, it is a throwback to the old Pac-12 because it's USC Oregon, but it's a big game, or at least I would consider this a game of the year because it's a big game for USC, and we haven't had a premier game for USC in the Coliseum in a long time, at least in this decade. Now, yes, going back to the Sam Darnold years, yes, there were big games there, but in terms of recently, I just cannot remember the last time we had a major game in the Coliseum. Like, the last time we had one was what? Probably when Penn State was there a couple years ago, but even going back even further, like when Texas was there, when Tom Herman was the coach there at Texas, that was probably the last time you had a major game there in terms of helmet brands, or at least a big helmet game, right? So USC Oregon, classic West Coast game, huge game for Lincoln Riley early on. At this point, you would assume none of these teams would have lost a game yet, so they'll probably would be undefeated. Maybe top 10, probably top 12 teams battling out here. That's a game I'm really looking forward to, and also, by the way, it won't probably be on Big New Kickoff. It'll likely be the either 3:30 on CBS or the 8 o'clock game on NBC. Right? Like, I'm not expecting this game, since it's going to be on the West Coast, to be a Big Noon kickoff. If that's the case, that'll be like a 9 o'clock local kickoff there. So more than likely, the Big Ten on ABC, or not ABC. This game probably will be a Big Ten on the Big Ten on CBS. A lot of things to remember here. Big Ten is the Big Ten CBS game, or this will be the late NBC game for the Big Ten. A lot of acronyms to remember here. That's why I'm getting confused here. But yeah, USC Oregon clearly should be on here again. Like, this is a huge game for USC. And now look, is Lincoln Riley going to get fired if he loses this game? Let's say if USC loses the game, is he going to get fired? No. But the hypothetical air is definitely going to be deflated out of the balloon here. Okay, like, this is kind of huge, and it's also a home game for USC as well. Again, just cannot emphasize enough that you have the home field advantage, and you have the fact that you haven't lost any game. Both these teams should be undefeated, so the hype around this game should be massive. That's what I'm trying to say. Next up here, second to last in the Big 12, and by the way, no real ACC teams on here, or at least no ACC conference game, which is fascinating and sad at the same time. Just tells you how much that conference has declined over the years. Almost put, by the way, Clemson and Miami on here, but I made the executive decision not to do that, because we don't know what Clemson will be. Now, look, let's just say we know ahead of time they beat LSU in week 1, and Clemson is undefeated going into that game, and Miami should be undefeated going into that game, then yes, that could be a game of the year. But we're not going to assume that's going to happen, at least yet. So that's why there's no ACC game on here. Again, that's more for reflection on the conference. That's not my fault. It's their fault. I would love to have Florida State Miami on here. I would love to have Clemson or Clemson Florida State on here. It just could happen. We do have an ACC team. It's just a non-con game. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So Utah-Houston, a Big 12 game. I would have put Texas Tech Houston, but that would have been too easy, and not to mention there's all this other crap going on around with Texas Tech, with the gambling stuff with Brandon Sorsby. So because of that, we decided to go with Utah Houston. You have a new coaching staff at Utah. Yes, you do have most of your roster coming back, even though you lost Kyle Cunningham to him taking a new job in Michigan. I still believe Utah is still one of the more premier brands in the Big 12. And how they've separated themselves, not yet, but they're definitely one of the more established brands. And now the team they're hosting, Houston. Again, they had the 5-star QB who will be starting for them, even though they still have Connor Wegman. But it's kind of it's sort of a non-secret that they are moving on off of Connor Wegman, the 5-star kid whose name's escaping me for some reason. He will be the starter. At least in my opinion, he should be the starter, and I think he is going to. But this is a huge game, just within the Big 12 ramifications, right? If Texas Tech, for all the on-field or the off-field distractions, and probably even on the field too, for all those distractions, not a guarantee they'll repeat as conference champs. Right now, you still have BYU out there. Yes, I totally understand that, but you also have the Utahs of the world and the Houstons of the world, and even the Kansas States of the world too. So this is kind of a game to sort of help us figure out who will be at maybe not the number 1 team in the Big 12, or at the very least the number 2 team in the Big 12. And I think this game will help determine that. I'm not doing a prediction here all the way in June, but if I had to favor which team I would favor here, I'm actually going to go slightly leaning towards Houston. If I had to pick this game today, I'm going to go with Houston, given that with ever since Willie Fritz has been there, he's been higher. Again, he's been improving the roster. They've gotten better. That the 5-star quarterback coming in, yes, he's still a kid. I get that. He's still pretty young. He's not some experienced quarterback. I mean, this isn't like he's like a sophomore and he started games last year. But just having faith in Willie Fritz and knowing how different the Big 12 is, and how there's a lot of uncertainty with some of these, even with the top teams of Texas Tech, the off-field stuff. I just feel like this game in particular is going to tell us a lot about who, again, at the very least, is going to be the second best team in the Big 12. Could you make the argument that BYU, given Texas Tech's off-the-field issues, have they surpassed them as the best team in the Big 12 going into this year? You can make that argument, okay? But for the second best team, it could be Texas Tech, could be Kansas State, could be Utah, could be Houston. This game will help us figure it out a little bit, okay? And then finally, wrap up this segment, Notre Dame, Miami. This one's going to go under the radar just a little bit because, it's dealing with an ACC team, and it's, it's a game that's not going to get a lot of energy, though it should, because it is the rivalry, Catholics versus Convicts. We saw this game last year. That was an instant classic down there in Coral Gables. This time we'll be in South Bend, Indiana. This will be, I believe, either in late October or November. So it'll be cooler up there. Now, grant you, it's not like this isn't the game where I would necessarily say, oh, this is one of those Florida schools going up into the cold. I'm not saying it's going to be like 35 degrees and snowing at this point, but it's a borderline game where I would be concerned about the Florida school going up to the north. I'm not totally there. Well, obviously, we will get to once you get closer to the game, obviously in the next few months, know what the forecast will be. But that is just, a concern to circle there for Miami. That, again, this is a warm weather-based team going up to a cold weather climate. It doesn't work out well. Again, go ask any of these, for example, go ask Florida when they go face on the road at Missouri, at Vanderbilt, at Kentucky in November. That is a oil and water mixture, okay? And same thing with Florida State. When Florida State goes up to like Boston College or Pitt, that does not end up well. Even though they may win the game, it's usually a close and competitive game. Why? Because most of these players, they're just not used to playing in that type of weather. And for Miami, this is the closest they're going to get to playing in Big Ten weather. They're not used to that usually. And most of these guys are from the state of Florida. They're not used to playing in this type of cold weather, especially if this game is being played, if I recall, in November. And around that time of year in that part of the country, it gets cold and it can potentially be very cold. Not a guarantee, but just something to think about. And not to mention, too, this is Notre Dame's biggest game outside of BYU. Because remember, they go to Provo, I believe, in September. So this is really a two-game season. Now, yes, they also have SMU later in the year, but we'll see what SMU looks like by then. But for Notre Dame, it really is a two-game season. Because remember, they lost they don't play USC anymore for the foreseeable future, which sucks, and it's stupid. But because of the current schedule and way things have gone, at least in the scheduling department for Notre Dame, this is a two-game season now. In the past, this would have been a three-game season with USC. But again, because USC's out of the picture now because they don't play them anymore, it's a two-game season. Now, granted, the casuals and the general public will say, oh, this is just a one-game season. Yes, it may look like that, but BYU is another game on here that I could have very easily put on here. But I didn't because I think this game is obviously going to draw more and more eyeballs. It's a classic rivalry. Even though, yes, you should not be slipping on that BYU Notre Dame game earlier in the year. But this game for sure, yes, it's Notre Dame's opportunity to get a marquee win. So this is a team that is very loaded. It's a team that, in my opinion, is more than likely disaster-proof. Same thing with Miami. I think Miami, at least if Mario Cristobal and his tenure there have, outside the first year, Rachel, that was, well, you can probably call that year, at least Mario's first year when they lost Middle Tennessee. Remember that? Anyone remember? Probably don't, because that was like 5 years ago now. That was year zero, okay? So we are way beyond having to deal with that year zero transitional liminal period around. Like, this is now purely Mario Cristobal's program. I think this team, at least in my opinion, is a disaster-proof roster, a disaster-proof team. I don't expect they will struggle that much. This should be still a marquee game, and this is a game much like, sort of in a lot of ways, sort of like Texas-Ohio State, where it's a very good helmet game. Not to mention, too, it's a classic rivalry. So those are the games of the year. Again, there we go. We just go for the list again. Georgia-Bama, biggest game in the SEC. Texas-Ohio State, biggest non-con game of the year. Ohio State-Oregon, biggest conference game, period. Out of all the major conferences, this is the biggest conference game of the year. USC-Oregon, big game just for Lincoln Riley, and also it's a throwback to the old Pac-12. Utah-Houston, biggest game, in my opinion, for the Big 12. And also it really is going to help us determine who will be either the number one team or at the very least the number two team in the Big 12. Then you have Notre Dame, Miami. Big game for Notre Dame. and also it's just a classic rivalry game you just can't ignore. Okay, so games near for me. Yes, they do look very similar to some folks' list, but that just means great minds think alike, I guess. As the old saying goes. Anyway, I'm gonna get some water real quick here and gotta hydrate. Ran earlier today, actually, which is why we were able to do the show this time. Because usually around this time, on normal circumstances, I would go for my run, which is I usually run 3 miles. But since you live in Florida, like I mentioned earlier, it's like 90 degrees. Like it's like literally 9 degrees away from being 100. I'm not going to sacrifice my body and literally die. So I went earlier when it was like what, like low 80s, high 70s. Still humid, but it's a little more comfortable. Even though it still came back looking like I just jumped in the pool. So because of all the humidity, but anyway, remember, kids, hydrate. As we are kind of taking a small mini break here in the show, again, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the streams when we do them, like the videos when we do them. Be sure to follow us on Spotify when we do the extra pods. I haven't done one in a while. I think we'll do one next week. That's the plan. Tentatively do one next week somehow, some way. And be sure to follow us on the socials as well, X and on Instagram. Not active on Instagram lately, but have it on good authority. Maybe once the season gets closer, we'll be more active, hopefully. But not everything's guaranteed, as they say. Let me see here. When I get actually, what is next on the agenda here? I believe it's actually just a question, so we don't actually have to pull up any graphics. Let me double check here. Yeah, it's just a question, and we'll do the team record projection. So, this is a question, or not just a question, just something I wanted to sort of present here a little bit and kind of explain what's going on here. So you've seen a lot of folks talk about Arkansas, right? Now, Arkansas is a program we don't talk about a whole lot on this show because, as Bud Elliott says in terms of using his terminology, Arkansas is one of those take the checks, take the losses programs, right? They just, it's the whole, just be thankful you're in the SEC and have the SEC sticker on you and you're getting all this money and all the, sorry, got dust on my nose here. Apologies for that. Just be lucky you're in the SEC, you have the right sticker on your helmet, you're getting all this money and revenue and whatnot. Just be happy and just put up with getting beat up by the other bigger teams in the league. And unfortunately, they're not the only ones. The Big Ten's dealing with this. If like Maryland, Minnesota is on that list to a certain extent. Indiana in the past was one of those take the checks, take the losses. Now, of course, in the SEC, you have Arkansas. Obviously, you have Mississippi State, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, to a certain extent, South Carolina, obviously, number one. That again, it's not that we hate these schools, and I just want to clear this up too with what Bud's been saying over the years. It's not that Bud's, and at least I don't know him personally, but what I can gather, it's not that Bud hates these teams. It's just he's just being honest. Okay, he's being brutally honest about what these teams are and what purpose they serve. Is that they take the checks, they get the money. Just be thankful you're in the conference that you're in, and just continue to take the losses. And your administrators and your coaches and whatnot, even though yes, they're not long for this world in terms of being employed there, they'll say get generational wealth. We'll just be lucky you have that sticker on your helmet. You'll be fine. So again, it's not necessarily we hate these teams. It's just that we're being honest. Okay, like this is how the game works. Not to mention, along with the whole idea they just take the checks, take the losses. These schools, these take the checks, take the losses schools, also have a tendency to have a lot of turnover rate because they have to restart the hype cycle. They have to get people invested again. They have to sell the big lie. They have to pull the wool over your eyes and say, oh, don't worry, guys, we just have to make this next hire. And then, oh, I'll be all great, bro. Like, we just got to make this never hire. And we have to get this coach in. We have to, get this money here and whatnot. That's the big lie. That is a total lie. It's a good lie because it gets fans invested. It gets folks to contribute to the program and show up to the games. But anyone who's been following this for a while knows that's just not possible. Now, yes, you can make the caveat and say, well, Kirk Cignetti in Indiana changed that. That is true. That is a caveat. But again, it's a caveat. It's a subject. It's more or less. It's not something that I really see being replicated a whole lot. But we'll see. But anyway, with Arkansas in particular, they're just not a program that a lot of folks, again, who follow the sport for a while, they're not really serious about football. Like, just think about it here. When was the last time Arkansas had a really good team? Yes, you can make the argument that, well, the earlier Sam Pittman years, they had good players, right? Of course, Sam Pittman comes in 2020. Yes, they improved, albeit it was a very, very, zombified year. Yes, it still counts, by the way, but the conference records and whatnot are very much still different. But yes, it's an improvement over the Chad Morris era. But yes, things got better in got really, really good in 2021. They were actually at one point a top 10 team. Remember that. They faced Georgia, and remember Gabe Day was in town for that, and Kirby and Fowler were doing the noon kickoff. And I mean, yes, it was a very, very boring game, that Arkansas Georgia game, but still, I mean, that was a top 10 matchup. That was the first time in over a decade that Arkansas had been ranked in the top 10. Okay, like the last time they were ranked in the top 10, they lost to Louisiana Monroe. Okay, and one of the most like weird upsets I can ever remember in college football, at least following the sport traditionally when I started to back then. So, like I said, like go back to like when was the last time Arkansas had a really good team? At least a team you thought they could win a national title. Certainly not the Sam Pittman years. Certainly not in the Chad Morris years. Obviously, those teams want to combine 4 games. Not even during the whole Brett Bielema years. Now, yes, he had spurts. He had moments where they were winning 8 games or 7 games a year, and they were ranked randomly at times. But those years, not really. John L. Smith was a transitional period. Yes, they were preseason top 10, but I think realistically in the modern era, they probably would have not been. But you have to all the way back to 2011. Bobby Petrino's final full year at Arkansas. That was a team that at one point was ranked in the top 3. If I recall correctly, they faced LSU that Friday after Thanksgiving as a 1-3 matchup. Winner goes to the SEC championship game. Very, very strange looking at things now and things historically for Arkansas. That just seems very bizarre. That was the last time that you really saw Arkansas look like a team that could win a national title. And yes, the sport was different back then. And, the SEC at that point was really just kind of a 2 to 3 team league. Because remember, this was after Urban Meyer left Florida. Auburn, yes, they won the national title, but Chiswick and, things were kind of going in the opposite, or at least going in the wrong direction at that point. Arkansas started, I guess they sort of took Auburn's spot as being like the 3rd best team in the league. Or I guess, yeah, third best team in the league. So, yeah, it's been that long. And again, all this people, saying, "Hey, look, look at Arkansas. They're just a team no one cares about." They're just being brutally honest when they say that. It's just a program that they really just don't really. They don't take football seriously. And again, I know. Yes, Bud brings up all the time how they focus on baseball, they focus on basketball, they focus on track and field. That's because, at least, yes, front facing, they can say all this stuff about, well, we're just getting one coach hiring away from being a national title contender, or we're just one thing this way, or we're gonna do this and this should get us this way. In the modern world of college football, with NIL and the way the sport's going, that's just not going to work anymore. Or at least that whole lie. Yes, it still works, but people can very easily figure it out. Okay, it's still a good lie because yes, you should tell your fans, hey, if I was trying to sell Arkansas football, at least from a admin standpoint, yes, you would be doing that. That's the way you should be doing it. I mean, you'll be stupid not to do that. But unfortunately, folks who watch like this show or Josh Pate's show or Cover 3, you start to realize that's just an erosion. That's just hubris. Okay, well, Grange has not earned hubris, but it's hubris because you're in the SEC. And again, I'm not trying to steal Bud Elliott's thunder here, but Bud brings it up all the time. Is that like just do this exercise here? If you're to put Arkansas in the Big 12 or in the ACC, Arkansas's win total and like their ability to win like conference games would go up so much more. Okay, like they are. If you're to take, grant you the exceptions here in the ACC and the Big 12 are obviously, there are some schools that spend more, like Houston, Texas Tech, Utah in the Big 12. Then you go to the ACC, obviously, currently Florida State, Clemson, Miami. Take away those, 7, in between 5 or 7 schools total. All the other schools combined in the ACC and the Big 12 do not have the history or the potential spending capacity as Arkansas. Again, if you put Arkansas in the Big 12, they're probably winning 9 games per year, in my opinion, at least 8 or 9 games a year. Same thing, the ACC. Those conferences are way more weaker than the SEC and the Big 12. Why? Because those conferences are, even in their best years as of recently, are just top heavy. The rest of the league, just a whole bunch of, NC States, North Carolinas, Wake Forest is, Uh, some Iowa State's in there. Yes, they've had some good years, but the calculus is changing now because Mike Campbell has left for Penn State. I mean, you also have Arizona's in the world and Arizona State's in the world. Teams are not typical annual powers. So you kind of, again, if you do this exercise, you put Arkansas into either one of those leagues, their win total, I guarantee you, is around 8.5. Whereas in the SEC, it's probably around what, 2.5, 3.5, maybe on best. In their better years, 6.5, even that. Again, that's just the way that the sport works. Unfortunately, for some of these schools, it's just that Arkansas is still in the SEC. Why? Because of money. That's the reason why they're in the conference. And unfortunately, because of the way the sport is, or at least the SEC is structured with football and how much people spend and how much more they brought in other football, or at least more historical powers in football. That's why Arkansas now, at least, especially recently, has gone towards other sports. They've invested more in basketball, and they're investing more in track and field, apparently. And they're investing more into baseball. It's unfortunate. If you're an Arkansas fan, you wish you could see more games being won. You wish you could go to a conference that would make more sense, not only geographically, but just make more sense in terms from a competition standpoint. But then again, how are your administrators and your players and they get paid, right? Because this whole revenue share thing, right? So that's why they're still there, and that's why this is going to continue for the foreseeable future. So again, it's not that all these personalities hate Arkansas. No, they're just being brutally honest, and you can apply the same logic to any of these others. Take the tech, take the losses schools, right? Whether it's Mississippi State, same thing can apply there. Same thing can apply to Vanderbilt. Same thing can apply to Missouri to a certain extent. Same thing with Maryland and Indiana in the past, and all UCLA and all just use any other school that would fit that whole criteria. Again, it's not that we're hating these schools. It's not that we're trying to it's not that we're having fun hitting on these schools. It's just that we're being brutally honest. Okay, like we're just trying to tell you guys how this works. And another thing that Bud brought up on Cover 3 the other day is a lot of folks were saying, and I think this is when he was bringing up his summer school he does, which I would recommend you guys watch. Those are very, very informative. But he was doing a summer school. I don't think it's out yet. It might be out, but he was doing it with Trey Biddy over at Hawks 247. And I believe Trey said something to Bud during the episode. It's like, man, I can't believe the legal office always gives Arkansas the raw end of the deal. They always get the toughest schedule. They always get the toughest teams on their schedule. And then Bud's rebuke on the show, I don't know if he actually said it. I haven't watched it yet. If it's out or not, I don't think it's out. But anyway, Bud basically said on Cover 3 the other day, he just said, look, I'm just being brutally honest. That's the way that this thing works. And you have to be real about this. It's just that Arkansas, again, much like South Carolina and the SEC, much like Mississippi State, again, they take the check, take the losses. Just be happy. Just shut up and don't say anything. Your administrators are getting paid. Yes, it sucks for the fans, but every so often make a coaching change. You can sell the lie. It's all good, okay? And unfortunately, if someone has to take the L's, and that's why Arkansas, Mississippi State, South Carolina, they always get the raw end of the stick. They always get the toughest schedule, especially now with no more divisions. Now, maybe not historically, but in the past, you can make the argument that Auburn got the toughest schedule because remember, they historically, and they still do, but they're the only, at least on an annual basis, they're the only school now that plays Georgia and Alabama every single year. It used to be Tennessee, but Tennessee doesn't even play Georgia every single year anymore. See if that's changed. But currently, Auburn's the only school that plays Bama and Georgia. Then on some years they'll play, especially now with no divisions, LSU and maybe A&M. Some years are Florida or whatever, or Texas and OU. So Auburn, yes, they technically have a tougher schedule because they play the two biggest brands, at least historical legacy brands in the SEC. But Arkansas, on a regular basis, they get the toughest schedule because they're the weakest team. That's just how this works. Same thing with Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt also has a tough schedule. Why? Because they're the weakest. And the conference the folks in Birmingham, the conference commissioner, Greg Sankey, all of them, they know that these weak schools have to play the toughest schools. I do agree with Bud. I just don't understand why some of these people, even Arkansas fans who should know how this works, they're just either in denial or they have hubris. Granted, you know that hubris is earned, but again, I get it. Trey's trying to, portray Arkansas as a bigger brand than it is, and he's trying to, pump up the brand, and then he's feeding into the hubris and stuff. And I get all that. And look, if I was in his shoes, I would probably be doing the same thing. But you also have to be brutally honest with yourself that this is how it works. Again, take the checks, take the losses. Again, that's not my saying. That's Bud Elliott. I do credit him for creating that. But again, that's Bud's honest about it, and I give him credit for it. This is how it works. And unfortunately, some folks, whether it's on purpose or not, they just don't get it. They don't get it. And I think some folks are still blissfully unaware of how the sport works. And again, you can apply this to any other of these schools, whether it's Mississippi State, South Carolina, Maryland, Rutgers is another one people use a lot, is that they're just there just to collect the money and not get left behind, because otherwise they would be. And it's unfortunate, but, it is what it is. And there's nothing you guys can do. There's nothing I can do. Look, I would love to have Arkansas have success. Unfortunately, the only way you can do that is to do it through a video game. But, oh well. Moving right along here, we have team record projection here next, and we'll get out of here. Again, this is not our traditional schedule for the show. We typically do this on Thursday. Beginning yesterday, it just didn't work out, so we couldn't do the show. But hey, look, it's our show. We can do our schedule how we do it. Yes, we're not a big fan of taking vacation around here, but we do that sometimes. We'll be doing it here in a few weeks, or 4th of July. So there is a reason, but, I'm not the biggest fan of doing it, but, is what it is. I get some water real quick, and then we'll move on here to Clemson from their team record projection, which I'll just say, a little bit of preview here. This may shock some people. I'm actually somewhat optimistic about Clemson this year. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just, maybe it is going to be another Phil for it again award, but who knows? I knocked down hand sanitizer on my desk. Let's see here. I'm going to pull up this graphic here, and then we'll kind of explain this. Our team record projection for Clemson. It's the wrong graphic there. We actually just did that. The games of the year. All right, Clemson. This is the graphic I wanted. Okay. Clemson team record projection 2026. Here's the graphic here on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, just listen to me. Hopefully, you're listening carefully. Of course, Clemson last year, they won 6 games at a losing record. Excuse me. They, of course, had the game against Syracuse, and just last year just did not go well. And I think a lot of folks, I don't know, maybe not just me. Now, obviously, I was a part of it. I kind of, fell for it. I think some other folks fell for it as well. I think Josh Pate, at some point during the summer, if I recall, he actually had Clemson up in his preseason poll, not the power ranking, or excuse me, not the power ratings, but his actual rankings. And some other folks too had Clemson out there too, just because of how much talent they had coming back, which was true. And look, that's not people lying to you. That is true. Clemson had a lot of talent coming back. It was another year under Garrett Riley. It was never him being the OC. That was the final year of having Kate Klubnik as the quarterback there. Just a lot of folks thought, you have that coming back. You bring in Tom Allen as the DC. You just thought, okay, this could be the one last chance for Dabo Swinney to win a national title, or at least have a chance to do so. And you saw what happened last year. And Dabo Swinney made some changes especially on the offensive side of the football. Granted, they're not like new changes, unlike what he did the last time, which, they had not Tony Elliott, but they had, I think it was Tony Elliott or whoever replaced him. I think it was who was it, the Streeter guy or something like that. And so they promoted from within with the other OCs number of years ago when they left. So they promoted from within originally, then they fired the Brandon Streeter guy, I believe. Then they brought in Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's brother. He comes in, then of course he gets fired last year. And now the new OC, it's it's literally going back to the future. You're hiring Chad Morris again. And I remind you, the last time Chad Morris was coaching in their major college football, he was where? At Auburn with Gus Malzahn, and that whole staff there got fired. So not the best omen to bring Chad Morris in. Yes, he's familiar with Dabo. Yes, his offense, at least in the past, was very successful when he was there. But my only rebuke here, my only concern, which is why I'm hesitant, to sort of give you guys this graphic here. And yes, you can laugh at it. And yes, you can say you're falling for it again. But there is some legit, some worry here that this is not going to go the way Dabo thinks it's going to go. Where, hey, you bring in Chad Morris. Yes, it's a blast from the past, but the last time at least I'm trying to speak for Dabo here, it worked the last time he was here. So, maybe, we can get things back on the right track. But then again, should I remind you, they were still running this offense back when Trevor Lawrence was in college. This is back in 2020. Even in DJU's first year as a starter, they were still running a version of this offense under Brandon Streeter. And even back then, it wasn't working. It was stale. It was not something very, creative. It wasn't, it just felt expired. And there's a reason why you have seen over the years Chad Morris not getting any coaching jobs. Why? Because the offense he runs, well, yes, it may have been good 10 to 15 years ago. I don't know if it's still good anymore. And that's why I question that hiring. Now, another thing to be cautious about is, of course, the new starting quarterback, Chris Vizina, I believe. A lot of the recruiting folks are not very high on him, okay? A lot of folks were very uneasy about him going to Clemson. A lot of folks just didn't really think he was starter material. Based on what I saw from the spring game and some of the notes that I brought up it wasn't a month ago, but a few months ago, back during spring ball. Well, yes, Vizina might not be the most exciting new starter. Obviously, there was some concern about how good is he going to be. I just think that the fact that you were hearing stuff about, hey, Clemson can run the football again, the offensive line maybe getting a little bit more better. It's a second year under Tom Allen as a DC. Maybe you're going to see some stuff change there. That got me excited. And after hearing Dabo's interview with Josh Pate back about a month ago when Josh visited Dabo there in Clemson, that also made me feel, even with all these worries and even with all these concerns, there's a way where this could happen, where they could go the best case scenario of 10-2. Now, grant you, it's a very, very strange situation because I've talked about this before, that Clemson's schedule is not necessarily it's kind of weird. So they play LSU week 1 on the road, of course, at night. Then they come back and they get in the regional G5 team that's in the region. I think it's Georgia Southern this year. And then they go to North Carolina. Then they go to Cal on a Thursday night. There's a real chance that Clemson, if things really do go off the rails, or at least don't go the way I think they could go, they could start 2-2, right? They could lose to LSU. They could, maybe win the next 2 games after that. And then they go to Cal on the road on Thursday night on short rest. They could lose that game. Then they have to turn around and face Miami. So that's for the worst case scenario comes in play here, where just the team, sort of like last year, just kind of collapses. Now, I don't necessarily think this is going to be a total disaster with Clemson. It's going to be 2022 LSU or 2022 Texas A&M or Auburn the last few years. I don't think that's going to happen with Clemson. I think Dabo, at least over the years, built up so much of a culture that it's so rooted in that I don't think it's going to completely erode and completely collapse on itself. But there's a real chance that they could stumble out of the gate here, especially if things go off the rails fast and they lose to Cal on the road on Thursday night and have to turn around and face Miami a week later. Or I believe there's a bye week or something, but actually, no, I don't think so. I think it's actually a week after. But again, if you look at Clemson's schedule, I don't have it pulled up on the screen here. But again, outside of, if you look at all their games here, which games are they actually going to be dogs in, right? LSU, you're going to be a dog. Miami, you're going to be a dog at home. Outside of that, I don't see any other games here unless things really start to fall apart. Could you potentially be a slight favorite or maybe a small dog at Cal? Potentially. Not impossible, but unlikely. Florida same thing. We'll see. Virginia Tech, it's at home, so that's good. Now, if that game was on the road, that's a different story. So again, as you can kind of see here, there is a real potential that in the best case scenario, Clemson can have a good year. Again, just based on the fact that the rest of the ACC outside of Miami really has not stepped up, right? And yes, you do play LSU in the non-con, but that's a non-con game. I wouldn't be too concerned. Now, if it's a total blowout, then yes, I would be. Then now let's start to get a little concerned because again, you don't know where the team's psyche is at. Not granted, like I just said, I don't think it's a total concern with Dabo or someone like Dabo who has a very good culture there established. So again, I just don't think that's a realistic, situation in there to have this whole thing collapse from a, you know, um, culture standpoint. So I think 10-2 here is very realistic. Just because you're in the ACC, yes, there's other games on here you could lose at Duke, at Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech. Yes, that is possible, but I just don't know. Even with Georgia Tech and Duke and all these teams, how much better are they actually going to, or at least how are they comparable in talent towards you? I don't think so. Even with the amount of the whole, I mean, all the respect I have for Duke and Manny Diaz and the folks over there at Georgia Tech with Brent Key, I just don't know if they have the same talent level and experience level as Clemson does. So that is something to factor in there. So the best case scenario, 10-2. Again, the worst case scenario, things really go off the rails at 6-6. Again, that sort of seems jarring, given that this is Clemson. A lot of folks, especially who are a little bit younger, are more used to having Clemson being a national power. This is kind of, sort of in a way, Clemson, the way they've fallen off, is sort of like what happened to USC after Pete Carroll left. But it's different because, unlike Pete Carroll, Dabo Swinney's still there. He's still there at Clemson. This is why it's even more jarring. It's almost more comparable to Bobby Bowden in his final years at Florida State. It's actually very comparable, actually. But probably more recent example is probably more USC after Pete Carroll left. But anyway, so yeah, 6-6, that is definitely jarring just based on the fact that it is the ACC. Most reasonable, in my opinion, and what I'm expecting here. Again, yes, you can look at it and say, man, you're falling for it again, man. You haven't learned your lesson. Clearly, I haven't, and I'm thinking Clemson, most reasonable scenario here, is 9-3. That's just my opinion. You guys can fight me in the comment section. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And that's the show. How about that? We got this in just before the noon hour. So if you are new here, again, we don't typically do this show around this time. We usually do it, or at least this day of the week, we usually do it, on Tuesdays and Thursdays only. But scheduling issues and the opportunity here to do a Friday show, nothing wrong with that. So until next Tuesday, we should be good with the show then, and the schedule should be about the same. We'll be back, normal schedule next week, sort of like this, but minor change here. We'll be back. And enjoy the rest of your week, or the end of your week. Enjoy the weekend. I know there's the NBA Finals tomorrow, so I guess there's something to watch. If you're not a soccer fan or a football fan, international football. So if you're like me, then I don't know. I guess you're going to play college ball 27 or college ball 26, not 27. That comes out in a month. But anyway, yeah. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your